Hello everybody. This is just going to be a quick update. I couldn't wait. I was going to add these notes. I made a video the day I'm making this one. I made the video at my daughter's ranch. And we're going to discuss, it's kind of going to be a completion. That's coming up in a few days. And it really is almost like everything, the history of everything part 3. But we talked about Brexit and things. The reason I couldn't wait, I'm writing notes. I started watching the news. Let me say today, though, I'm just going to comment on the media. That's it. I watched 30 minutes of the news. When you see the Brexit update, me talking about it, I get into it a little more because my daughter had questions. And then I got into the whole history of Renaissance, the 1500. I did a lot of that. The media is mad today because Brexit happened, meaning Great Britain left. Why are they mad? The people that Great Britain left the European Union, okay? And the reason they're mad is the media in our country tried to portray everybody in Great Britain that wanted to leave the European Union. They had very legitimate reasons for that. I get into it in the future video. But the media in this country portrayed basically those who wanted to leave the European Union, which they did today. Last night was the vote. But they portrayed those who wanted to leave, which were the conservative side, the people in Britain, as the Trump, racist, all of that whole narrative. And the people, of course, that wanted to stay were the more liberals. David Cameron, Prime Minister, would be like the Democrat of the country, opposed to the other side, who'd be the Republicans. I watched 30 minutes of absolute disgrace on the news. Slander, Hitler's, nuts with nuclear weapons. This was the news portraying. And then an absolute disrespect for the actual democratic process. The news began with basically showing Donald Trump at his golf course in Scotland. I talk about that in a future video. And some guy that was protesting Trump threw Hitler golf balls. I want you to just understand media bias and narrative, which the public is aware of, but just watch that. So the 30 minutes of news, and I switched to a few of the world news channels. It started with Trump being associated with Hitler golf balls because people were protesting Trump and they threw golf balls with Nazi stickers, swastikas, okay? So the news began. Then it went into the fact that Trump was at his golf course in Scotland as all this broke, and so they would ask Trump questions, and they mocked him by the headline news on CNN earlier in the day was Trump compares golf courses to running the world. I talk about that also in a future video. They, instead of simply talking about the Brexit, which was a big story, they found every excuse to say Trump is an imbecile and so forth. Okay, that's fine. Now, then the next section on the world news was a man who they talk like they're very sincere, these media people. The next section was some man, they said, well, Trump's vision of America, to make America great again, which is his slogan, they compared it to the slogan of the people in Great Britain who wanted to exit. And they said, then they showed Trump's campaign sign in some state that said, make America great again. But they then said, but some innocent person who really loves true values, he changed the sign to make America white again. So now, after seeing the golf balls with the swastika associated with Trump, you now see a big sign. Obviously, it wasn't Trump's sign, but it showed Trump, make America white again. Okay. Now you're at a critical time in the country with the Orlando bombing, and I'll show you how the media ended the news. We'll get to that in a second. Now you have associated Trump. You have associated the people in Britain who were the conservatives who decided to leave. The media then said, how could the vote have gone this way? And they said all of the older people who bought into the racism, now they're talking about Britain, all of the older people who voted to leave, and our media basically saying they voted against Obama and Cameron, who are the liberals, and they voted the conservative Trump way. They said those people chose to leave because they bought into hatred. Those older people bought into fear. They bought into the most base emotions of humanity. Remember, the Hitler, the Trump, Make America White, and it said basically, so the older voters of Britain have enslaved the younger people of Britain who wanted to have a real future of love and hope and embracing. That was the U.S. media's conclusion on how it didn't go the way they wanted. Okay? Then they continued to, that was the whole 30-minute narrative. And at the end, I had to change it because I didn't want to keep hearing this. But at the end, they had a boy, it said, in Alabama, who did a very risky thing. Okay, maybe you're going to get away from your narrative. Maybe you'll do some news. The risky thing he did was he sat down on his Facebook page from Alabama, and he typed in something, and he didn't know if he should actually post it. And he came out as gay. That's okay. He came out as gay in solidarity with those who hate homosexual people and murdered them, which was the Orlando Pulse thing. Okay. And he decided it was time for him to come out because of the actual hatred and murder. Now, this is all associated with the coverage of Donald Trump with the swastika, the man who changed Donald Trump's sign into Make America White Again, the people in Britain who voted to exit the European Union because they are racists, they are violent, they divide. This was the whole media's view. No respect for the democracy, the process of them. And then when the boy sat down and came out as gay, his mother said this was a risk for his life because we live in the Bible Belt. And then it showed a picture of a Christian church, and it said he came out because of the murder of all of those gay people in the Orlando Pulse nightclub in Florida, and then the picture of the church. And the mother sat with the son and said, because we live in an area where now his life is in danger because it's the Bible Belt. So the entire 30-minute media narrative was, never mind the fact that it was a Muslim who shot those gays, or never mind the fact that Hillary Clinton takes all this campaign money from countries who execute gays today, in our day. Never mind all that. The entire 30-minute narrative was the Trumps, the conservatives of Britain, those who side against President Obama, they're going to destroy everything. And this young boy at the end took the risk of his life, his mother said, and he said, because the churches in Alabama might try to kill her son. And when the media does all that with a straight face, they do not realize that they incite things. They incite violence. They interviewed the golf course businessman that Mr. Trump did the dealing with in Scotland. They go around to get it, and when they interviewed him, in the midst of this whole narrative, they gave him world news coverage. And they said, and what were your dealings like with Mr. Trump when he opened up this golf course here in Scotland? Obviously, the man does not like Trump. He said, oh, on the phone when we were doing our business dealing. Can you imagine interviewing any of the people that Bill Clinton attacked, women that he raped and did all those? Can you imagine giving them full coverage on world news? Can you imagine all the people that Hillary Clinton did bad to throughout her life, and just letting them talk? And they just picked this guy, whether it was, fact-checked or not. And he said, oh, yes, when I was on the phone with Donald Trump, he would joke, he would get mean to me. This is a businessman that he made a deal with on a golf course. And then this man said, and to put Mr. Trump in charge of nuclear weapons, it could destroy the whole planet. And you put that on the news? You picked that. And then you portray yourself as so loving at the end of that 30-minute show where you made it look like, and the Christian churches in Alabama, the Christians and conservatives from the beginning of the 30-minute segment right to the end, they might murder my gay son who came out in solidarity with the people who were killed by a radical Muslim. And your portrayal of Mr. Trump and anybody else who said, actually, maybe it's radical Islam that's the problem, you portrayed that as the cause of everything. Not radical Islam, not terrorism, but any person, because part of the vote in Britain had to do with the borders and all of the same thing that you're having in this country. So in 30 minutes, the narrative went that anybody who spoke against radical Islam were the cause for the Nazis, the Hitlers, and the murders that are taking place in the world today. Because surely that young boy who came out as gay in Alabama, even though it was Muslim, radical Islam who murdered those people in the Pulse nightclub, that's what you call media narrative. That's what you call media. These are all the notes. I thought I'm going to start writing notes. And that's what I want you to see. Whether you are a conservative or liberal, did I get them all in? Let me see. Hitler golf balls. The whole 30 minutes. It's hard for me to watch this stuff. You say, John, you shouldn't. They don't respect the democratic process when they do that. Because they mocked. And they basically said the people who voted in that Brexit vote, the reason they did it is because they were ignorant, they were racist, and they were an older generation trying to enslave the freedom of those younger. So that's a narrative. I might just tag this with tomorrow's video. I forget which one is going up tomorrow. But in the next few days, I'll talk about... There was one good thing, by the way, I wanted to mention. I just remembered. I watched a documentary a few months back, and I mentioned it the other day, and I didn't realize it was the documentary I watched. There was a man by the name of Rosario. Now, NBC News has done a very good job covering this, and they have a whole Dateline documentary. But Mr. Rosario, Hispanic from New York, has spent like 25 years in prison for the murder of some guy in New York. But over time, it was obvious it wasn't him. There were other officers in Florida and all who were with Mr. Rosario the night of the murder. These guys, people are now cops and all. They said, no, Mr. Rosario was with us. Other officers are saying that back in that day. And it's quite obvious that the cops in New York had framed this man Rosario. And when I watched this documentary months ago, I commented on it. And then the other day, I commented on a news story. I didn't know it was the same one. The cops, it's very obvious. Rosario, who was framed for some murder in New York years ago, he had like 17 alibi witnesses, names, addresses. And when they sent this guy to prison for, I don't know, life, he's already done like 25 years. The cops in New York never once called or interviewed any of the other alibi witnesses. And these witnesses are now also officers and stuff because they went on to careers and they testified, no, Rosario was framed. Well, it was his case where the Innocence Project were going to get him off. But they were going to get him off by just dismissing the case. And in court, he said, no, I'm not going to take the dismissal. He said, I'll spend the rest of my life in prison because you're covering up crimes that you committed against me, the New York City police and DA and all. He said, I will not take that dismissal. It was Rosario. And others have done that. Mr. Morton has done that and others, where they said, I'd rather spend the rest of my life in prison instead of allowing you to just dismiss all of the criminality prosecutors and cops have done. Those people are just. Those people are just. And that was the one good thing you could say out of the 30-minute news. I haven't watched that world news in many years, okay? On a regular basis. I watch a lot of the clips on news. But that type of a narrative, the liberal media playing into associating Nazism, white racism, Trump has not displayed that. Trump, if you were an honest, he's considered a much more liberal. His comments were very politically incorrect about how you're going to screen Muslims coming into the country. Our country actually has a process right now where we discriminate when you apply to come into the United States. And that process, you could say that President Obama has done. President Obama has deported so many illegals. He's passed Bush in doing that. You could say Mr. Obama has been much more racist or anti-immigrant. And many on the political left are absolutely not supporting Hillary or Obama because of many of the things Hillary Clinton was behind, which many conservatives were behind when they enforced a lot of stricter laws, 3 strikes you're out things. And many in the black community said, look, we had a lot of our family members spending life in prison, not because of violent crimes, rape, but 3 strikes you're out. Maybe it was minor things, like caught selling drugs 3 times in a row. People need to think for themselves before they say we're going to support a certain candidate. Okay? I'll try to get this one tomorrow. The next few days, this ain't the teaching video, but the next few days, that's what we're going to talk about. Some of those issues. I get into Brexit. I get into the biblical understanding of the kingdom of God. People yearning to be free, but that the root of that is it's not just political, okay? A lot of times people, so we cover that. I just had to do this as therapeutic because it was a disgrace what that media did and what they continue to do. And those that are on the liberal side of the aisle, and I'm on both sides in both ways. But you're inciting violence because whoever threw those Nazi golf balls at Mr. Trump, that person's been also listening to media over and over. You had the goal to put someone who vandalized Trump's sign, and it says, "Make America White Again." But you showed that on the news. There's a lot of people that might not have actually heard the audio, and all they see is a clip. Trump, make America white again. And you say you're for peace. You portrayed all those elderly people in Britain, and it wasn't just the elderly. I saw many of the young college kids interviewed that also wanted the independence. But what you portrayed was all the younger kids wanted freedom and a true country of love. But the older ones bought into the racism of the right wing and of the Trumps. But there were many younger college students, because I watched the interview on PBS News, and they had legitimate reasons why they wanted to exit the European Union. But your 30-minute of United States media, you misread on purpose what happened. Okay? All right. May God bless all you guys. That's just a media update. I had to do it so I'm going hurting me to watch that stuff. God bless.